All right, hello second graders. Miss Seals back for our second science lab of the new school year. Today we're going to be doing one of my most favorite science lab activities. I really wish that you could be in here with me doing this activity, but I think you'll also have fun watching it as well, okay? So today and over the next couple weeks in science, we're going to be talking about something called physical properties. Can everybody say physical properties? Very good. So physical properties are ways that we can describe objects. Anything that you can describe about an object is a physical property. In kindergarten and first grade, you've talked about some physical properties like color, size, shape, texture, and you practice describing objects in all of those ways. In second grade, we're going to add on a couple more physical properties. One is temperature, which means how hot or cold something is. One is flexibility, which means if something is able to bend easily or not. And then the one that we're going to focus on today is called the state of matter, which means is the object a solid or a liquid? That's what we're going to be focusing on today. Okay, so here's your target. It says I can classify matter by physical properties, including whether material is a solid or a liquid. So today we're going to be learning what a solid is, what it does, how to tell if something is a solid. Same with a liquid. And then we're going to be making something, and you are going to be deciding based on all those characteristics of solids and liquids whether the thing that I make is a solid or a liquid. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see this fancy PowerPoint that I've made. It says solids and liquids, and then here's your target again. I can classify matter by physical properties, including whether material is a solid or a liquid. All right, so the first question we need to ask is, what is matter? I've already used that word a couple times. It's in your target, so we need to know what it is, right? But it's easy. Matter is anything around us that takes up space. Matter can be classified into what we call 3 states, which is solid, liquid, or gas. In second grade, we're just going to be focusing on and learning the difference between solids and liquids. All right, so everything around us that takes up space is matter. These paper towels, this piece of paper, me, the water in this cup, the air around us, everything that takes up space is matter. All right, so let's talk about a solid first. It says, what is a solid? A solid is an object that has its own shape and size. I'll come back to that in just a second. Solids are breakable, which means they can be broken. Some solids are hard, but not all. Solids can also be soft. I'll give you some examples of some soft solids in just a minute. And solids can be measured. They have mass, which means they're heavy or light, and we can measure to find out exactly how heavy or light they are. And they have volume, which again means they take up space. All right, so let's go back to where I said a solid is an object that has its own shape and size. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second so I can show you what I mean by that. So take my marker, for example. Okay, my marker is shaped like this. If I hold it in my hand, it's still shaped like this. If I set it down on the table, it keeps its shape, right? If I put it into this cup, it still keeps its shape. I could measure its size, and its size does not change whether I'm holding it in my hand or putting it in the cup or setting it on the table. All right, it's a solid. Let's go back to that. All right, so they have their own shape and size. It could be broken. It's hard, but there are some solids that are not hard, and it can be measured. All right, let's look at some examples of solids. A shoe is a solid. Coins, a banana, an ice cube, a pillow. There's a soft solid. So even though a pillow is soft, it is still a solid. Cotton balls are soft. They're still a solid. Your blanket is soft. It's a solid. It doesn't matter if it's hard or soft. It matters, does it have its own shape and size? Can it be broken? Can it be measured? All of those are qualities of a solid, all right? A rock is a solid, and Miss Seals, I am a solid as well. All right, let's talk about a liquid. A liquid does not have its own shape, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Liquids take the shape of their container, filling the bottom of the container first. Liquids can pour and spill and flow. And liquids, just like solids, they can also be measured. They have mass, which means we can measure to find out how heavy or light they are or how much matter is in them. And they have volume, which means they take up space. So that's something that solids and liquids have in common, or something they have that's the same, is that they both have mass and volume. All right, so let me show you what I mean when I said liquids do not have their own shape. And I also said they take the shape of their container and fill up the bottom of their container first. I'll show you what I mean by that. So in this cup right here, I have some water. Water is a liquid. All right. Right now, because the water is in this cup, the water is shaped like this cup. But, see if I can do this without spilling. If I pour the water into this container, now the water is taking the shape of this container, okay? Since it's a liquid, it does not have its own shape. It takes the shape of its container. Also notice how it fills the bottom of the container first. All right, that's very important. Also, I know it's a liquid because, as I said before, it can pour, it can spill, it can flow. It does not have its own shape. All right, let's go back to our PowerPoint and look at some examples of liquids. Juice is a liquid. Ketchup is a liquid. Water. Vegetable oil. Milk. Soda. And liquid hand soap. All of these things are examples of liquids. They do not have their own shape. They can pour and spill and flow. They take the shape of whatever container they're in. All right, so let's practice. I'm going to show you a picture of something, and I want you to think and decide if it's a solid or a liquid. First one is food coloring. You might use this when you color Easter eggs, or maybe you make icing or frosting that you want to be a certain color. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple seconds to decide if it's a solid or a liquid. And if you said liquid, you are correct. Very good. Food coloring is a liquid. What happens is you take those containers, you turn them upside down and squeeze them, and then drops of the food coloring come out. It takes the shape of its container. It can pour and spill and flow. All right, it is a liquid. Very good. Let's look at our next one. Ooh, coffee, my favorite. I'll give you a second to think about it, if coffee is a solid or a liquid. Ask yourself, does it have its own shape, or does it take the shape of its container? Can it spill and pour and flow? If you said liquid, you are correct. Good job, guys. Wow, you guys are smart. Coffee is a liquid. All right, let's look at our next one. A hammer. I'll give you a second to think about it. A hammer is a solid. Very good. Hammers have their own shape. Hammers can break, so hammers are a solid. All right, I have one more. This one's kind of tricky. Sand. Let's think about sand for a second. Ask yourself those questions. All right, sand is a solid. Let's talk about sand really quick because I know you're probably thinking, but Miss Seals, sand can pour, I can hold it in my hands, I can use it to make shapes and sand castles with, but when we're talking about something like sand or even like salt or sugar, these are what we call pourable solids. So what we mean is that if you take each individual grain of sand, that's a solid, right? Each little tiny grain of sand has its own shape. It can be broken. However, since it's so small, when we have a lot of them together, it kind of acts like a liquid and it can be poured and it can be used to make sand castles and things like that. Okay, but each tiny little piece of sand would be considered a solid. So sand is a solid. All right, good job. You guys are smart. So one last question I have, and this is kind of something we're going to be talking about a little bit more over the next couple of weeks, but I wanted to start on it today. It says, can matter change from a solid to a liquid or from a liquid to a solid? That's a good question. And the answer is yes, it can. Matter can change. Solids can change to a liquid when heat is added. This is called melting. Not all solids can melt, but many can. Can you think of something that can melt? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about something that can melt. I'm thinking of an ice cube. An ice cube is a solid, right? But if I leave it out on the counter for a while, or I even rub it in my hands, I'm adding heat to it and it's going to melt. And after a couple of minutes, it's going to change into water. Water is a liquid. All right, so when solids change into a liquid when heat is added, that's called melting. We're going to talk a little bit more about melting here in the next couple of weeks, all right? And liquids can change to a solid when heat is taken away. This is called freezing. So an example of this would be if you've ever taken a water bottle or a cup of water or something and you put it into the freezer, you're removing the heat. After a couple hours, you're going to have solid ice. That's called freezing. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple weeks. There we go. All right, good job. You guys are smart. You already know a lot about states of matter. All right, so this is what we are going to do today. This is super fun. I am going to be making something called Oobleck. Can you say Oobleck? That's a weird word, isn't it? So Oobleck, some of you might already know what this is. If it's not, I'll explain it. Oobleck is similar to slime or gack or silly putty or anything like that, but it's a little bit different, okay? I'm going to be making it. I'll show you all the materials I'm using. I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm going to be making it, and then I'm going to be doing 5 different little tests or investigations to it to see if we can figure out if the oobleck is a solid or a liquid. All right? So before I make it, remember last week we talked about how scientists make a hypothesis, which is a prediction or an educated guess about what you think might happen in an experiment. All right, it is okay if your hypothesis turns out to be wrong. It's just a guess or a prediction. So what I want you to do right now before you continue is I'd like you to pause the video. I'd like you to share with your mom, dad, grandma, babysitter, aunt, uncle, big brother, big sister, whoever is sitting there and doing your schoolwork with you. And I would like for you to share your hypothesis. So you could say, I think that oobleck is a blank, and in that blank you could put solid or liquid because, and then explain why. Remember that when a scientist makes a hypothesis, they use their background knowledge. So even though you haven't seen Oobleck before, you've seen slime, you've seen gack or silly putty or things like that. So think about what you've seen and what you know. Think about those characteristics of solids and liquids that I just talked to you about and make your hypothesis. Explain why you think it's a solid or why you think it's a liquid. After you're done, you can restart the video and then I will show you what we're going to be doing. All right, see you in just a second. Okay, so we are ready to make our oobleck. I'm going to show you the materials that I'm going to be using. Before I get started, remember that when I'm doing demos on here, this is not something for you to do at home unless you have a parent's permission, okay? This oobleck is not dangerous. However, it is kind of messy and it does use some materials or supplies that you have at your home that your parents may not want you to use. If this is something that you would like to make sure you have permission from a grown-up and they say it's okay. All right, so the only ingredients in oobleck are, the first one is called cornstarch. It comes in a box like this. It's used for cooking, okay? It's just a white powder. It doesn't really have a strong taste or smell. It doesn't really taste good, but it says right here, it's great for thickening. So if you or your parents are cooking and they're making something like a gravy or a sauce or a soup, a lot of times they will add cornstarch to it to kind of make it thicker and less watery, all right? So our oobleck is cornstarch and water. And if you want, you can add food coloring if you want your oobleck to be a certain color. I'm gonna add green to my oobleck, all right? But you don't have to. If you don't add food coloring, it'll just be white and that's fine. All right, so I'm going to combine my ingredients. So the recipe for oobleck is always 2 parts cornstarch to 1 part water. That's it. So in other words, you could do 2 cups of cornstarch and 1 cup of water. Since I'm here by myself and you're not with me, I don't need that much. I just need a little bit. So I'm going to do 1 cup of cornstarch and 1/2 cup of water. You kind of have to play with it, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. Sometimes you don't want to add all the water right away, depending on the temperature and the humidity and other things that are going on. I might have to add a little bit more water or a little bit more cornstarch, but I'll show you that in a minute. All right, so to make this a little bit easier, so I make less of a mess, because you know Miss Seals is messy, I put my cornstarch in this bowl so I can just kind of get a big scoop of it. I don't know if this is going to make it easier or not. Here, I'll use my spoon. I want a nice big full cup of cornstarch. All right, I'm going to kind of make sure it's even. I'm not going to pack it down super tight. Just going to kind of even it out. All right, so there's my, oopsie, I already made a mess. Goodness gracious. There's my cup of cornstarch. All right, then I need to add my water. Before I add my water, I'm going to put my food coloring directly into the water. I'm just going to put maybe 1 or 2 drops. All right, you could do whatever color you want. I like to make Oobleck green because Oobleck comes from a Dr. Seuss book. I think it's called Oobleck. I don't remember, but in the book it's green, so I always like to make mine green. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour the water into the cornstarch. And then, most important step, I got to stir. I want to get all of that water and cornstarch mixed up together. Ooh, and it's already getting very difficult to stir. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna make a big mess. I told you that cornstarch acts as a thickener, so it makes the water very thick and difficult to mix up. Let me make sure I'm getting it all mixed in there. Holy moly. All right, seems to be pretty good. A way you can tell, excuse me, a way you can tell if your oobleck is ready is if you touch it and it's kind of bouncy, and you don't want it super sticky. If you touch it and a bunch of it sticks to your finger, it's not quite ready. But this seems to be pretty good. All right. Yeah, seems about right. All right, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put some out on my table. Whoa, oh my goodness. So that we can do a couple tests to it. Remember, we're trying to figure out if the oobleck is a solid or a liquid. All right, so the first thing, let me get a little bit closer so you can see. The first test I'm going to do to it is called the slow poke test. So I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to poke the oobleck very slowly. I want you to make sure you're watching what's happening. Oh, that part might still be a little gooey. All right, so notice how when I poke the oobleck slowly, it kind of changes its shape, right? It kind of leaves like a little fingerprint or indentation in it, but then it slowly goes away. So that's the slow poke test. I would say on the slow poke test, I would say that the oobleck is acting more like a liquid because it's moving. It's kind of flowing around my finger, and then it goes back to its original shape. Okay, that's the slow poke test. The next thing, whoops, is the fast poke test. So I'm going to poke it again. This time I'm going to poke it really hard. Really fast. All right, and I notice that when I'm poking it fast, it's not really changing much. It's not really doing anything. So would you say that this is acting more like a liquid or a solid during the fast poke test? I think a solid too. All right, so far we have the slow poke test where the oobleck acted more like a liquid. Now we have the fast poke test where the oobleck is acting more like a solid. Confusing. The next thing is the pour test. So what that means is I'm going to see if, oh my goodness, I'm going to see if the oobleck can be poured, because we've talked about how liquids can be poured, but not all solids can. So let's see, can I pour the oobleck? Is it pouring? It's definitely pouring, right? So what's that acting like? Is that more of a solid or a liquid? That's a liquid. You're exactly right. Liquids can pour. All right, so far we have 2 tests where the oobleck has acted like a liquid and 1 test where it has acted like a solid. All right, let's try our next test, which is rolling it into a ball. I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to see if I can roll. Oh my goodness, you got to be fast with the oobleck. I'm going to see if I can roll it into a ball. Can you see? And I was able to roll it into a ball, right? Interesting. So that means it doesn't necessarily, oh my goodness, that means it doesn't necessarily have its own shape. Oh, this is tricky. You got to be fast. It doesn't necessarily have its own shape because I was able to roll into a ball. So again, more like a liquid. The last test is the bounce test. So when I have it rolled into a ball, gotta be fast, I'm gonna see if I can bounce. I'm not fast enough for this. I'm gonna see if I can, let me move my computer back. Oh my goodness, this is the joys of making a video, right? Hold on, Miss Seals is struggling a little bit. I'm gonna gather it up, roll it into a ball, and see if it can bounce. Ready? Does it bounce? Not really. It kind of just splat and then kind of spills and pours out. Let's see that again. How about I do it where you can see it? That might help, right? Does it bounce? Doesn't really bounce. It kind of just hits the table and then spreads out. All right, so let me kind of clean up this mess so we can talk about the Oobleck. So we did 5 different tests to our Oobleck, and we saw some where the Oobleck acted more like a solid, and we saw some where the Oobleck acted more like a liquid. All right, so I want to know what you think. Do you think that the Oobleck is a solid or a liquid? Go ahead and share with somebody near you what you think and why, and then I'll tell you the answer. Are you ready? All right. Are you ready? This is a secret. I'm going to tell you what Oobleck is. You can't tell anybody because it's a surprise. And every year, 2nd graders get to make Oobleck in the science lab. And if you tell kids that haven't done it yet, you're going to ruin it for them. All right? So here's the answer. Are you ready? Oobleck is both. Oobleck is something called a non-Newtonian fluid. And what that means is that sometimes it has the properties or characteristics of a solid, right? When I touched it, or applied pressure to it, it acted more like a solid. But other times, it acts more like a liquid, and the molecules or the particles spread out and spill and flow, and it takes the shape of whatever container it's in. Like right now, taking the shape of this bowl. But you saw I was easily able to pour it out, right? So Oobleck is both a solid and a liquid. It's called a non-Newtonian fluid, which means sometimes it has the characteristics of a solid. Other times it has the characteristics of a liquid. Pretty cool, right? I hope that you guys had fun. I hope that you are able to classify matter by physical properties, including whether material is a solid or a liquid. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.